Hello and welcome back to another LATAM This Week video. I'm Ewan Marshall, the editor of the Brazilian Report, and I'm here today with our Buenos Aires correspondent, Ignacio Portes. Ignacio, how are we all doing? Is that good?
All good. Good to be here, Ewan.
Excellent. So today, basically, we're taking a quick recap of the Argentinian midterm elections, which happened on Sunday, this Sunday past. And yeah, let's just get straight into it then. Ignacio, what were the results? What did we learn?
Well, we learned that, again, Argentine primaries are a good indication of what will happen in the Argentine proper elections. Argentina has this pretty strange election system where people have to vote twice in 2 months. First for the primaries, which are mandatory. Every party has to participate. Every citizen has to vote. And then 2 months later, we have the proper elections. This time it was midterm elections. And well, the opposition had got a big victory in the primaries, around 40 to 31 points 2 months ago in September, and now it was 42 to 34 to the opposition. Very similar results. Only the government cut the margin by 1 point, but overall, maybe the opposition was expecting to maybe increase a little bit the vote count, take advantage of the bad moment that the government had been going through. So there was a bit of relief amid the Alberto Fernández government, the center-left government in Argentina, that they didn't lose by as much, that it cut the margin of defeat a little bit in Buenos Aires province, which is the territory they care most about. And they tried to paint it as a victory. Alberto Fernández said, okay, thank you for everyone that tried to get out the votes in these elections. We are going to celebrate it in Plaza de Mayo Square. We're going to thank all the people for their effort, but it was still a big defeat for the government, and it will have consequences for the last 2 years of Alberto Fernández administration.
So it's interesting you mentioned there that they are perhaps celebrating this as a bit of a victory. But when we look back at the difference between now these midterm elections and when Fernandez was elected originally, I mean, there's been a massive dip in support if we're looking just at electoral results.
Yeah. Like 2 years ago, Alberto Fernandez won by a landslide in the primaries by about 15 points, and in the final election, the proper presidential election, he won by 48 to 41, or 48 to 40 actually, and this time he lost 42 to 34. So it's like a 16-point swing in favor of the opposition if you compare it with the presidential elections, which is not always a perfect comparison, right? Presidentials and midterms, but it still tells you something. 16-point swing. And this will definitely shows that inflation, the pandemic, the government not managing to deliver on its promises on a better economy was all very damaging for the administration, despite having like the pandemic as an excuse, let's say, for economic problems. But patience is running thin with Kirchnerites and Kirchnerite-friendly politicians that have been in power for 12, 16 years now, if you count this last government, and that people are not so patient with the government, even if it has excuses like the pandemic.
And I think one of the big outcomes, maybe the big takeaways from this particular midterm, was that the government lost control of the Senate in Argentina. Yes. So can you just explain quickly why that is so significant?
Well, it is very significant. The Senate is a very big chamber in terms of it's important to name Supreme Court judges in general, diplomatic members, agreements, international agreements, and generally pass any law. Really, it has to go through the Senate, obviously. And Peronism, the force of which Alberto Fernández and Cristina Kirchner are part, has never not been in control of the Senate under democratic governments, right? Since Peronism was born in 1945, only when Peronism was banned or when there was a dictatorship did Peronism not control the Senate. So for the first time since the return of democracy and since the creation of Peronism, the opposition will democratically have control of the upper chamber, and this might have very big consequences, because if eventually the opposition comes back to power, if either Mauricio Macri or Horacio Rodríguez Larreta or some other person from the opposition takes power in 2023, they might have a friendlier Senate, which might allow them to make some more drastic reforms than they could the last time they were in power in 2015.
And interesting, like earlier you mentioned the specter of inflation there. What are we talking about in terms of the kind of the economic impacts or repercussions of this particular election result?
Well, the government is struggling economically, but looking forward, I think the main discussion that we will see is the IMF deal, right? Argentina has the biggest debt that any country has incurred with the IMF, $44 billion contracted under Mauricio Macri's administration when it suffered its debt crisis in 2018. Which was largely why Alberto Fernandez's government was elected in the first place. Now Alberto Fernandez will have to renegotiate this massive debt, as it has already renegotiated the private debt, also contracted by the previous government. It has managed to kick the maturities down the road a few years. It is trying to do something similar with the IMF, but the IMF wants something back in exchange for that. It wants fiscal austerity. It wants maybe some either labor reforms or market reforms and more freedom in terms of how Argentines can use the exchange rate system, how capitals can flow in and out of the country. Well, I mean, the government, there's, especially in the Cristina Kirchner camp or that sector of the government, there's a lot of resistance to those reforms. And there's a lot of resistance to the legitimacy of the deal that Argentina contracted because it also violated some IMF rules, the way in which Argentina contracted that debt. So because the IMF is supposed to not allow capital flight while it gives money to that country so that the debt is not misused. But anyway, Alberto Fernandez, he would send a project to the Congress, maybe to the new Congress, probably the one controlled in the Senate, at least by the opposition, so that he has bilateral support for a deal with the IMF looking much more forward than the next 2 years, so that when the next government comes, maybe an opposition government, it will have agreed to the terms that Argentina signed with the IMF, and there's bilateral support for how to renegotiate this massive debt that Argentina has to deal with.
Okay, Ignacio, thanks a lot. That was a great little recap. We're all up to date now with what's happening in Argentina. If you want to find out more about the Argentinian elections and where we go from here, I highly stress that you should be signing up to the Brazilian Report, which obviously is the journalistic engine behind all of these videos and podcasts and everything that we come out with. And if you want to support our journalism with some donations, you can buy us a coffee on the Buy Me a Coffee website. And until next time, we're going to have another Latin America video for you. And take care, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.